Well, at this time, we are joined by the ZANU-PF Secretary for Information and Publicity, Mr. Christopher Mnangagwa, who joins me in studio tonight. Good to see you face to face.
Thank you once again.
Welcome.
Thank you, News Africa.
It's good to have you here. Let's start with the ZANU-PF's big takeaway from this summit. What is the message that you take home after this gathering?
Well, we take back a message of hope in that old friends from the trenches of the liberation war in the 60s, 70s, and 80s have refound a new purpose. And this time it is delivering expectations of palpable prosperity to the young generation. We do face, as has been mentioned by President Cyril Ramaphosa, the challenge of the youth bulge in our populations, and they expect modernization, they expect urbanization so that it can deliver jobs. And if we actually deliver on jobs through urbanization, through modernization, we fulfill the expectations of those who sacrifice, because people don't sacrifice for the sake of a party or a leader or a flag. They sacrifice for the prospect of a better life as a reward for their sacrifices.
Yeah.
So we in Zimbabwe, we are focused very much on the youth and how we can make them become successful citizens who can produce goods and services for a modern economy, not only the national economy, not only the regional economy, but also for the global economy. This is where ZANU-PF is going.
All right. When President Mnangagwa says his government will be people-centered, that promise is something that the ZANU-PF party should have been living by in any case, because it is the people of Zimbabwe that have put you where you are as a governing party. So
yes.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, in practice, it means that we align our resources to our people, which we have done. The land has been given back to our people. And you can see even this year, we have notched 360 million kilograms of gold and leaf tobacco in Zimbabwe, which is a third more than even at the height of the colonial era. And the quality is very, very high, and the price is more than $4, $3 to $4 a kilo. This means about $1 billion going into rural farmers in Zimbabwe, of which the most producers are SMEs. 80% of that turnover of 1 billion is going to our people in rural areas.
Yeah.
We also go further to the gold sector. You know, in Zimbabwe, people don't know. Unlike in South Africa, your gold is DPA and the rand. In Zimbabwe, gold is everywhere, literally everywhere. And we have allowed young people to dig gold since 2016. And you will be happy to know that SME gold mining now produces more than 30 to 40 tons of gold per annum. And this is $2 to $3 billion being pocketed by young people digging gold in Zimbabwe. So when our currency, the Zimbabwe dollar, is now being traded in the global marketplace, it is backed by gold.
Yeah.
In fact, you will be happy to know that on the current account, Zimbabwe is in the black. You don't need to fill any forms in Zimbabwe to get US dollars. You just go into the street and you buy them. You go into the bank, you buy. The US dollars are not given for free by the American government. When you have them in America, you've worked for them. When you have US dollars in Zimbabwe, you've also worked for them. And this is the reality of Zimbabwe, that these two major economic endeavors, gold and leaf tobacco, are actually the drivers of our national economic resurgence, of which most of it is SME-centered. And I speak on authority because my wife, Monica Mnangagwa, is actually the Minister of SMEs.
Yes.
She is really excited about what's happening with the SME sector in Zimbabwe.
I can't not notice that you speak very glowingly about the Zimbabwean economy.
Yes.
Young people are the focus, as you put it, including the support for businesses. However, when President Ramaphosa says liberation movements are under siege, I wonder whether you agree with him, and if so, what would you say the reason is for ZANU-PF declining as well?
Look, I think, we are in a geopolitical state of flux right now. America has got a president who may have delivered regime change in America before regime change is delivered to Africans, especially in the case of Zimbabwe. So there are certain aspects about the new American administration, particularly the Trump administration, which are very positive about Southern Africa, notwithstanding what may be happening between the ANC and the American government, which we see as an anomaly. Look, 3 months ago, Trump signs $4.7 billion of US money pumping into Mozambique's Cabo Delgado for the extraction of gas. Mozambique is number 3 in the world in terms of gas deposits after Russia and Qatar. And to have an American president write a check of $4.7 billion, the largest ever American check in Africa given to an African country, it's a good thing on its part. We also look at the easing of the pressure on Mozambique. There was these demonstrations when Biden was in power. When Trump comes in, the demonstrations peter out.
Yeah.
Mondlane is to go back home and make peace with the Chapo and the country is stable again. These are positive things. We also in Zimbabwe feel a certain sense of easing of some of the pressure which were traditionally associated with the Democratic Party, which was viscerally anti-Zimbabwe. So there are, and then there's also the peace moves in the DRC, where America has now decided to constrain Kagame from aggressive tendencies. These are some positive takeaways from the current American administration. But there is also that momentum from the past where they just want to see the ANC as some kind of blackguard on the South African body politic. I think that needs careful handling. We think the Americans are misdirecting themselves in dealing with the ANC. They need to sit down so that diplomacy can carry the day, so that a regional power, which South Africa is, and a superpower, which America is, can find some kind of conviviality amongst the Washington, between Washington and Squanay, Pretoria. Yeah. That's what we would expect. So look, we are not, there are aspects which may be negative, but there are also positive takeaways from the current American administration in Washington.
Let's talk simple language, Mr. Mnangagwa. I think the language that everyone can understand.
Yes.
People watching you
yes.
are probably interested to know, why is it that so many of Zimbabweans are in South Africa? If you do a simple Google search, it'll tell you that the estimates are that between 3 to 5 million Zimbabweans are in South Africa. As to why they're here, well, I suppose the stories vary. To your understanding as a governing party, why are many Zimbabweans in South Africa?
Look, it is the search of better pastures. That's natural. South Africa had an advantage of having comparative access to capital as a white apartheid state. In colonial times, capital into Africa followed white. And South Africa had the biggest white population on the African continent. So all the Western countries, they gave South Africa a certain edge in access to capital. We in Zimbabwe and Rhodesia were second, because in terms of our white population, we're the second largest white population. We also had a comparatively better access to capital than any other African countries. And we had migration of labor from Mozambique, from Malawi, from Zambia into Zimbabwe. This is natural that people follow where there's better advantage in terms of development, and capital gives an edge in development. And these two minority regimes of Southern Africa had a sizable white population, so they had better access. But now things have changed. We're now having capital in a flat global world where China can supply capital, India can supply capital, Riyadh can supply capital. So we are now having an Africa which is going to the global markets getting capital. So that discrepancy in the access of capital, which was a precursor of the colonial, which was a case of the colonial era, is beginning to disappear. You can't believe it. There is now a seamless environment between life in Zimbabwe and life abroad. That's why our diaspora is coming back to Zimbabwe, putting a lot of money. We have never consumed so much cement and steel as we have done in the last 5 years of the current Mnangagwa administration. Why? Because our diaspora feels at home. They are now beginning to invest back at home. And for your own information, the biggest diaspora migration is white. Those who came, who were called Wenways in South Africa, who came running away from C.N. Smith's war, those who ran away from majority rule in the 1980s, they are all coming back. I live in a neighborhood which is very upscale.
Yeah.
They destroy the old colonial house, they build 6 to 7 others, and they rent 6, they rent 5. So the return of the white diaspora back to Zimbabwe is actually an indication that things are getting better in Zimbabwe. And remember, we operate in the hardest currency on earth, the US dollar. And if you can make your economy succeed on the back of US dollar, it means you are doing very well as a country.
All right. I can't, though. I cannot agree with you when you say...
We agree to differ, but I'll try to give you facts.
Let me cut to the chase.
Yes.
It was only in April
Yes.
that a big stairway was announced in Zimbabwe
Yes.
by those that are against what they say is a corrupt Mnangagwa administration. You speak about mines that are producing gold.
Yes.
We have seen the documentary about gold that is leaving Zimbabwe, according to that documentary, through corrupt means. The population of Zimbabwe in South Africa, they'll tell you that they are fleeing poverty and political suppression. Now, are you telling me that these things are a figment of the things that have been reported about?
Look, we went through a bad patch, especially after 2002 when we fell out with the West and our economy's wheels literally fell off the bus. This is what happened in 2002. This was the heavy hit from the West because these are our traditional economic partners. They suddenly put Zimbabwe on they unleashed hell on the Zimbabwean economy. I know because I'm the Zimbabwean ambassador to China at that time. We had to be dispatched to look for an alternative source of capital in 2002 because our traditional economic cooperating partners had abandoned us. They had actually given us an ultimatum to reverse the land reform or face economic hell. So when your economy suffers the sledgehammer effect of London, New York, Frankfurt, Paris, Milan, Madrid, Toronto, Sydney, coming against you, you really have to, you'll be hard put to survive. The real story is how we as Zimbabweans have managed to survive, but the most important, the exciting thing is that we've bootstrapped our economy now to an extent where we really don't feel the effects of sanctions anymore. I just told you, in this country, in South Africa, how many forms do you fill to get a US dollar from your central bank? In Zimbabwe, we don't have that. You know, the current account of Zimbabwe is in the black. The only US dollar burden we have is historical, inherited. This is a functioning economy whose current account is in the black. Now, the IMF was just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, at ZANU-PF headquarters. I met them at the ZANU-PF headquarters. They normally would never have invested at ZANU-PF headquarters, but they are beginning to accept that we have done things well in Zimbabwe. I'm telling you now, we have the best steel plant on the African continent, better than what you have in South Africa, better than any other African, better than even in Europe.
All
we
right.
are now producing steel. Steel is to human beings, is to countries what food is to human beings. Your trucks now, South African trucks, they are full, lined up in Zimbabwe buying steel to bring back to South Africa better steel, cheaper steel, and make your products more competitive on the world market.
Yeah.
These are the stories we want to talk about ourselves, not these negative stories about people who still have a hangover of the past when we were under sanctions. We are over that bad patch.
Mr. Mnangagwa, the last time we spoke, and you made it clear to me that Zimbabwe is not a 10th province of South Africa, and I hope that is going to hold true, hopefully. you'll visit us next time to tell us yet more good news, particularly about the Zimbabwean economy. But for the time being, I want to thank you very much for your time.